afternoon. This is the time and the place for the Growth Fund Committee meeting. We'll start with roll call.
Crary.
Here.
Holt.
Here.
Kwame. Osowski.
Here.
Regal.
Here.
Whitney.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from June 20th of 2022. Any comments or corrections on the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the election of chair and vice chair.
We have no staff report, but it is time. We are supposed to do this annually, and we have been for several years. Traditionally in July, we have elections, and for the last 2 years, Mr. Holt was vice chair and Brett Weber was chair. Now with Mr. Weber being chair of the JDA, he is not a member of this body, so you need to elect a new chair and vice chair, but anybody is available to be vice chair in terms of your appointment. It must be a city council member to be chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Richards. So at this point, we'll start with the election of the chair. I would open it up for any nominations from the floor. And if there are none from the rest of the group, I would nominate Mr. Weigel to be chair.
Second that.
Second from Mr. Crary. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And it's your meeting, Mr. Chair.
All right, we will. He handed that over way too quickly.
Very deft.
Yep. We'll move on to our vice chair nominations.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Holt has done an excellent job as vice chair, so I actually would like to renominate him to stay in that position.
I will second that.
Very good. Any other comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Congratulations. Maybe I'll hand this back to you. All right, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is the True North Equipment Bremer Bank loan request.
Thank you, Chair Weigel. That sounds a little strange. I've been saying Chairman Weber for a lot of years, so.
At least the W is still there.
Yeah. As your staff report kind of walks you through, the JDA did approve PACE loans for True North's logistics hub back in December of 2020. The lead lender on that project was Bremer on this $4 million project. The loan for the equipment purchase portion of that buy-down package did close, but there was an error with the bank, and so the larger real estate loan did not close. On behalf of True North, Bremer has requested that the JDA kind of fulfill that commitment to buy down the loan, but rather than having BND as the participating program lead, hold the funds in escrow. Bremer would hold those funds in escrow, basically assuming the role of BND and mirroring it and kind of doing right by the intention of the JDA in approving this interest buy-down program for that. Keith is really knowledgeable about the PACE program, so I thought he could kind of just do a quick run-through for our new member on how this works and how, in this case, Bremer would be fulfilling the role of BND.
Thanks, Mr. Richards. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. I want to give you a quick little primer on PACE, and for Ms. Osowski, maybe just an introduction to the program. In economic development, we have a number of tools, and one that we use quite frequently is a program called Partnership in Assisting Community Expansion, or PACE, from the Bank of North Dakota. And that is a program that, and the partnership it's partially funded by the local community, in this case the Grand Forks Growth Fund, and then majority of funding comes from the Bank of North Dakota. And funds are pooled between the community and the Bank of North Dakota to help reduce the interest rate down on a commercial loan. So Mr. Wolf could talk about this too. There's a number of derivatives of the program. The original PACE program, the one that we're talking about today, is really focused on primary sector company and expansion, so companies who produce a good or a service here and then sell it outside the region. There's Flex PACE, which is focused on community priorities outside of the primary sector. Childcare PACE, just as it sounds, and other derivatives of that program. So in this particular case, and in 2020, the Growth Fund Committee recommended, the Jobs Development Authority approved a $143,000, I'm going around for you, PACE loan for the benefit of True North Equipment for the expansion of their, for their resource center, or their impact center, pardon me, which is on Gateway, Demers Avenue. That loan was such that that investment was going to be applied. I should mention that the split in terms of the local and the Bank of North Dakota contribution, the Bank of North Dakota contributes 65% of the interest buy down, and the community, in this case the Grand Forks Growth Fund, will contribute 35% of that commitment. So the Bank of the Grand Forks Growth Fund committed $143,000 for that particular investment. That leveraged a grant of $266,000 from the Bank of North Dakota. The local investment is a loan, so that is used by, and typically the Bank of North Dakota, and is held in escrow to deploy to the loan to reduce the interest for a period of time. In this case, it was approved for a 10-year loan, and at the maturity of that note, then the company pays that amount back, to $143,000 in this case. Because of an error at the bank that has been in their letter, that loan did not close. And what this request is asking you to do is to fund that same amount. Still, it would be a promissory note from True North Equipment, so they would end up paying the amount back. The only difference, I guess, that I see in this case is the funds would be held in escrow at Bremer Bank. They would use that money then to deploy into the loan to reduce the interest, and at the end of that 10-year period, True North Equipment would pay that loan back to the Grand Forks Growth Fund. So in many ways, it's the same. The difference is who's holding the funds in escrow. Now, I assume that the city attorney would have to draft or agree to a new partnership agreement, because there's a template that exists for the Bank of North Dakota and the Grand Forks Growth Fund relationship. I imagine that would be a good starting point, but I imagine the city attorney could draft a document that would cover, the interests of the Growth Fund as well as the interests of the company as well. I hope that's an explanation that kind of resonates a little bit, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Ms. Richards? Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Lund, nice overview of the program. So just first of all, thanks to Mr. Onken for the investment in the region, and appreciated the history of what why we are where we are. With the BND portion being a grant, has that been settled, or was that funded? Was that buy down, has that already been completed?
I'll speak on behalf of the company, and then I'll ask Ms. Peterson to jump up to the microphone if I represented incorrectly. But Bremer Bank has worked with True North Equipment and has made that right from their standpoint. So what we're looking to do here is to take the local Grand Forks Growth Fund portion and add that to the mix, and to, I guess, make it complete from that standpoint. Again, using those funds to deploy to reduce the interest over the 10-year period of time, and then to be returned back to the Growth Fund, as it would be the case if it were held in escrow at the Bank of North Dakota.
Okay. Ms. Peterson, that's accurate. I was thinking that maybe would be what happened, and so for Mr. Onken, the interest rate, once we do this, the interest rate will be what he was expecting, and then you correcting that through your channels, I think admirable, and respect that. So that was my main question, other than what you just mentioned about Mr. Gosted being able to, for us to have having him work with Bremer on some type of agreement that he's comfortable with. That would be my only other comment.
Correct. Bremer has offered to have a lawyer prepare something appropriate, and then Mr. Gosted would review it, but there'd be virtually no cost to the JDA, and that the preparation would be done by others, but subject to his review and approval.
So that would be, just for the committee's, just my understanding summary, we're just going to do this, what we agreed to back in 2020, and then it's a loan that would be paid back at the end of the 10 years. So we just disperse the funds a little bit differently up front.
That's right.
Mr. Crary.
Not trying to put Mr. Ronkin on the spot, but obviously seeing the audience, do you mind just sharing a little bit what's going on there? I think it's really cool, and I think many in the community might not know everything that you're doing, and I mean, you're a tech company now, essentially, so not trying to put you on the spot, but yeah, John, if you're okay, sharing just a little bit on what's going on there, that'd be kind of cool. What's the money being used for?
Well, thanks everyone for having me here today and with the Bremer team too. So a little bit about our Impact Center. I guess it was June of 2020 that we all knew that the Wells property was empty, had been empty since December of 19. All the employees had 1 hour to leave and 169 people left, okay? So that property became very interesting for me because there were some large-scale buildings and capabilities there. And we actually just walked in the building and realized with 20-ton cranes and all these things, there are cool things can happen. There's about 82,000 square feet of space to work. And so what I did is basically centralized all my new deliveries, all my reconditioning from all of the retail stores from Baudette, Warren, Thief River, Grafton, Northwood, and on, Monoman, and we centralized those processes so it's consistent, it's right, and it's the same product every day, right? Then we do all the reconditioning there. So we have a staff of about 20 people working there, and there's 2 large shops, and there's classroom space, and there's about 20,000 square feet that's going to be redeveloped into more space like that. So we have functional things that were really good to leave those smaller communities because they weren't structured to be able to handle some of those things, and it wasn't that the facilities weren't, it's like city infrastructure and wash bays and all those things that didn't work well. So we're really the first in the nation to do something like this within our dealer network, any color, any brand. The classroom space, we do technology training. We co-partner with Deere & Company, so we actually are certified to redeliver Deere & Company training. So I could literally teach Deere people if I wanted to, employees. I could teach other dealers if I wanted to, but I teach customers, our team does. The advanced piece of this is that we're working with technologies, some of you may have seen with City to Farm Tour on autonomous things, semi-autonomous, and just the whole world of agriculture is changing so quickly. And you're going to see the customer base shift because of that. So every bank's going to see a different clientele. It's going to see a different way of how and who's going to succeed in this game, just like a dealer network. The ability now to have more space there to create customer support center type functions where we're using a non-traditional employee base that might be data science type PhDs from UND or other places, and people that are non-traditional that support really techie stuff. And as an example, I was just on the phone yesterday with the second in command at Deere & Company and Chief Technology Officer. We're just talking about the impact and what we can do to support the Career Impact Academy as a way of providing information about the next steps in ag that could be influential in our community to teach high school students what's the next game. So some really cool things happening. So it's fun to share, and you're always welcome to come there and see what it's like. There's 20 acres of space, and there's no more concrete and junk laying around like it started. So the funny piece is I had neck surgery over that project, and my business partner had back surgery. So I think we worked a little too hard. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ronkin. I just think it's a great example of, taking, well, not only a vacant, huge building, industrial space, converting into something that really serves our community, drives the labor market. It's next generation stuff for an industry that is the core of the whole valley of ag. So, sorry to put you on the spot there, Mr. Ronkin, but I think it's great to just kind of sheds a little light on what the dollars are being used for. So thank you. And with that, I move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5, Regional Workforce Impact Program application. Ms. Richards.
Thank you. We looked at this briefly at our last meeting. It was a little bit of a rushed presentation, but the upshot is that the North Dakota Department of Commerce, using ARPA funds, has created the Regional Workforce Impact Program, or RWIP as we're calling it, and they have allocated funds based on the 8 planning regions in the state, with our region, Region 4, slated to receive $1.71 million. This is, ARPA funds is COVID-related. The staff report from last time kind of walked you through the eligible activities that are listed in the grant materials, and what I started to say locally, but really it's more regionally, the approach that has been taken to allocate those funds has been to focus on the 3 areas listed in your staff report. Talent attraction at about $210,000 of that $1.7 million, workforce training at $500,000, and then childcare expansion at $1 million. In terms of the talent attraction, the Red River Regional Council and some of those more northern JDAs are focusing on an initiative similar to Grand Forks' Cooler, and where's Becca? Right there. That's kind of her baby, and so proudly this would certainly do nothing to water down Grand Forks' Cooler, but it was inspirational for those other counties. So the largest share of this, approximately $210,000, would go to launching a similar initiative that would focus on those 3 other counties in Region 4. And then, as part of Grand Forks' Cooler, and this would be under Becca's tutelage, there would be about $30,000 to do videography of rural Grand Forks County communities. Rather than just focusing on urban Grand Forks, this would kind of shine a little bit of a spotlight on them under that Grand Forks' Cooler umbrella. In terms of the workforce training, as we're all aware here, we're going to be building a pretty extensive Career Impact Academy. The costs for that have not surprisingly gone up, and so purchasing equipment for both our local facility and the one in Grafton was seen as a high priority. The respective directors of those centers have agreed on basically a 60-40 split, kind of based on the equipment needs of those facilities, so that one is pretty solid. And of course, the request that would be submitted by the JDA would be just for the Grand Forks one. Only cities, job development authorities, economic development corporations, or Chamber of Commerce's, I believe, are eligible to be the funding recipients. So we would act as the requester on behalf of the school district for the CIA in Grand Forks. Similarly with childcare, you can see that obviously this is a regional priority. I think we're all aware of that. A kind of quick application process throughout the region yielded requests of 3 times the funding that's available. Your staff report lists, after a bit of an eligibility review, what was left, which is slightly over $1 million. 3 of those are located within the city of Grand Forks, and that's basically the request that, again, that the JDA would put forward as part of this kind of joint application process. We are still working on a little bit of, trimming that total of the $1,147,000 down to $1 million, but I think what you see from Grand Forks is pretty solid. So what we're asking for today is just authorization to submit to the Department of Commerce those, in terms of the JDA, it would be a request on behalf of the school district for equipment purchases of the Career Impact Academy, and then a request on behalf of those 3 child care facilities that are in Grand Forks for the funding listed below. Any questions about process? Becca, of course, knows everything there is to know about the Talent Retention and Attraction Initiative, and she's been one of the Grand Forks representative on the child care group. So any questions about kind of the procedure that arrived at where we are, she'd be able to address those. But this is not that we will receive the funds, this is just authorizing staff to submit these projects to the state on the behalf of these applicants, assuming we get a positive reaction from the the state, then we'd come back to request authorization to accept those grant funds and be kind of the fiscal agent or administrative body on behalf of those organizations that would be funding recipients.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. Wolf?
Thank you, Chair Weigel. Ms. Richards, or Ms. Kruger, with this process, you answered the question about why the JDA would be involved, because it seems like the JDA is a qualifying entity, and working together with the different counties. These look like the right, buckets to apply for, but maybe comment on how we selected those buckets and how much in each bucket, and then a follow-up question, it references that if this would be to be approved, that Grand Forks County would receive 45 to 50%. Is that the right amount, or how do counties get together to try to decide what the right amount is? Any comments there would be appreciated.
I'm happy to take that if you'd like me to, Meredith.
Well, I can start while you walk up. In terms of kind of organizing the group, Red River Regional Council, which represents these 4 counties, was kind of the focal point. Dawn Mant is their director, and she joined us via Zoom for, a ridiculously brief time because we ran out of time at the last meeting. But that was kind of the focal point, was the Red River Regional Council convened folks like me, Becca, representatives from the Walsh County JDA. It is a very unusual process in that the state allocated these funds on a region-wide basis, and it's not a guarantee. You still have to apply, but it's not really competitive. It was up to the region itself to come up with the projects and programs that would be put forth. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good summation. Becca Kruger, I'm the Director of Workforce Development for the Grand Forks Region EDC. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Meredith, for that overview. So the Red River Regional Council convened a group across all 4 counties that included the JDAs, EDCs, anybody who was basically eligible and wanted to come to the table to talk about priorities within their region. So as part of that, we talked about what are the different needs in the community. Obviously, as you can see by funding allocations, childcare is one that rose to the top. In all of our counties, we have huge childcare deficits, which is a very large workforce issue. In Grand Forks, about 39% of the childcare need is being met. We have about 11,000 children and about 3,300 licensed childcare spots in our county. So when we came up with the 3 priorities, that was definitely one that was heavily looked at. And then talent attraction was another one. We have, if you look at our labor force, there's this conception that nobody wants to work anymore. But if you look at the number of people we have per open jobs, it's 0.45 of a person for every job that we have listed in Grand Forks County. And I don't know how many jobs can be done with just a pair of legs, but we need to start thinking about how we're attracting people from external audiences. So that certainly rose to the top. And then for the last one, which was the Career Impact Academies or the CTE centers, all of the CTE centers who were awarded funds at the state level have received some pretty shocks in terms of escalation in inflation and construction costs. And so I think helping to fill the gap in that project was something that both of our regions looked at as well. In terms of Grand Forks receiving about 40% of the funding, well, with $1 million allocated to childcare, we did do an open call to childcare providers across all 4 counties to submit applications, and all of those were submitted. I believe we received 9 applications and 7 will receive funding based on recommendations. And so the projects in Grand Forks County, there were 2 that likely won't receive the funding. So we tried to be fair. There was no set lead organization or agency that the state dedicated. And so as you can imagine, it involved a lot of navigating with our partners across all 4 counties. So.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kruger, these are all excellent ways, I think, to invest in our region. One question on the talent attraction piece. With those funds, I'm excited, right? You've done excellent work on Grand Forks' Cooler. It's amazing. It's done a lot of great things for the Grand Forks region in talent attraction here. In launching something similar, is these funds for the Red River Regional Council to bring someone on so that like you're not tasked with launching a whole new initiative for a region versus what's the plan there for those funds? And then how do we manage brand creep, if you will, if it's similar to, so that it's not too similar yet also something that adds to and adds value to an excellent program that's really done well for Grand Forks?
Thank you for that question. So that's a really good question because I don't want to take on a regional initiative.
That would be my concern. You already do excellent work. I'm not sure we can split you 3 more ways.
So about a $300,000 initiative because this grant does require a 25% match. Will be launched for Nelson, Pembina, and Walsh counties. That will be led by the Red River Regional Council. Part of the eligibility for this grant is that they have to be new projects, and so that's why there's a significant difference in what Cooler will be receiving versus this brand new initiative. Is we thought about what we could add to enhance Cooler. And by the way, these funds have to be spent by May 23 of next year. So what was feasible for our workload as well to take on. And so that's why the video project, which will be paired with a digital marketing initiative, will be launched in Grand Forks County, really focused on some of those rural communities because we have some video assets for Grand Forks City already. So we looked at where the gaps are and what was feasible. So I won't be taking over. As far as brand creep goes, we've had numerous conversations with that and also numerous conversations with those who are involved in that project, including Julie Rigg with Visit Grand Forks, Barry Wolfert at the Chamber, serves on their board, Brett Weber also serves on the board, and so we are keeping that in the back of our mind as we move forward, and we've had a lot of conversations also with Don Mant, who is the executive at the Regional Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Thanks, Becca. Question about the child care expansion piece, which, we talk about that a lot, but I don't know if people recognize how really critical that is. I was at an event in Fargo recently where I think one of the panelists said that, childcare is the business that allows businesses to do business. And, when I look at these numbers on here for expansion, there's one big number in there for one of them, and then there's a couple of, I would say, maybe smaller numbers. Can you just expand a little bit on what size of expansion we're talking about here? Because ultimately we need more slots in the Grand Forks community, right? So is that are these numbers going to allow these companies to do that?
Yes. So altogether, those 3 projects would add 167 slots to the city of Grand Forks, which is really large. Elway is projecting that they would add about 92 childcare slots. AOK, Academy of Kids, or AOK, they will be doing some renovations to their kitchen, to their security. And when we held our childcare forum, the largest topic of conversation was toilets. Who knew? Many times, a simple toilet is preventing childcare facilities from being able to expand. So Academy of Kids would like to install 5 new toilets, and that would allow them to add 58 spots to their childcare facility. And then also United Day, they would be expanding by about 17 slots. And those are across all age groups, so infant care obviously needs more child care providers. These are all capital projects and material expenses because staff time is not allowed for within this grant program. And I know that's a concern, is where are they going to find the staffing? But unfortunately, we can't address that issue through this grant.
Thank you. Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of following Mr. Holt's in regards to the childcare expansion, I just want to make sure, I mean, it's great, of course it's critical, more on the back end, the process, because of the disparity. Were each of these, the 9 providers that did the application, did they all know the money in the pot that they could apply for? So I guess maybe let me rephrase that. So, you know, if somebody's coming in here and they're getting $375,000, I mean, that's a big chunk of change, right? Mm-hmm. And any of the other providers, they all knew that that was available if they wanted to expand a wing or expand. I mean, they all kind of addressed their own needs. It wasn't like, I just want to make sure it was as equitable as possible in the application process. And I don't want, you know, say United Day to come in and say, what the heck, I didn't realize I could do a $500,000 expansion and that would qualify. So I just want to make sure that in that, because there wasn't really and I know it's throwing you guys hot and heavy and it's got to be spent really quick, and so it's kind of it happens very fast. So I just want to make sure at least everybody, what process was in place to try to ensure that everybody knew what was available and what they could do.
Well, you gave all of my caveats about the short timeline and everything, so you're absolutely right. But yes, it was a level playing field in that they were not limited to any particular dollar amount other than what can you do in this time frame, and do you have at least a 25% match? And then, you know, in Grand Forks, we're from opening a new center with Elway to United is, well, this allows them to open up another room in the facility that they're in to serve children. So it was, you know, up to the respondents to tell us what they wanted.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure, just because of this is a big swing, so I just want to make sure everybody was aware and that let them present it as what their critical needs are. So, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
Just one follow-up question. Ms. Kruger, so if I understood correctly, we'll have 3 in Grand Forks County, but there were 2 that will not qualify?
Yes, so we received a total of 5 applications for Grand Forks County. One was for a new construction out in Thompson, and that project was $1.5 million that they were requesting. We had to make some decisions, and we had to look really closely, right? So when you're dealing with federal dollars, you have to follow federal construction guidelines, and we just didn't think that it was feasible within a 6-month period to follow those guidelines and expend that money under current construction climate. So that one was one that we are not recommending moving forward. And then the second one was for Hopeful Beginnings, which is a project, and they were requesting reimbursement for slots and a project that was already created, which technically, it depends on who you ask, could be eligible, but as we thought about the priorities and the creation of new slots, we wanted to prioritize new projects with the money that we had. So those 2 were not recommended for funding, though they were Grand Forks County projects.
Thank you.
Any other comments, motions? I think this is all good stuff, in my opinion. I know childcare is a big concern, and to be able to open up significantly more spots will definitely help our community, help our workforce as well.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, sorry, one more question. Jump to workforce training for the Career Impact Academy. With the 25% match, is that, the amount of funds already raised covers that? Okay, just want to make sure, because obviously there's a 25% match, like where's that coming from, not JDA or where it is? Okay, perfect, thanks.
I mean, if you want to, you know.
Mr. Chair, I move that we authorize this to go forward.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. And I believe that concludes our agenda for the day, so I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I would.
Yes, Mr. Lund. You interrupted us leaving.
I didn't, since you had an
I should be
efficient
used to
meeting
that
and you
by
have no competition on the back end, may I just take about a minute to introduce a new staff member
Absolutely.
that hopefully we'll be seeing a lot more of? Kevin Hatcher joined the EDC about 3 weeks ago as our new business development officer, so he'll be up at this podium speaking to you frequently in the future, so I just wanted to make sure he was introduced to the committee.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair and other committee members for the opportunity. Just a little bit of background. Like Keith said, my name is Kevin Hatcher, Business Development Officer. My previous position was over at East Grand Forks Water and Light. I focused on the energy incentive program there, working with other small businesses. So I really had a passion of working with businesses to kind of accomplish their energy efficiency goals, and this was a great opportunity to kind of work in a larger role and help out the business community here in the Grand Forks region. So also president of a Greater Grand Forks YP too. So thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Yep.
Welcome, Mr.
Welcome. And I would also just say welcome to our new members, to Mrs. Sowski and Mr. Weigel, and I will move adjournment.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.